Mr. Zappala has been a good friend to victims in this community. We're very, very grateful for all he does with law enforcement and to help people in our community whose lives have been destroyed by violence. He's got a big heart and he's just terrific, and I can't say enough good things. And without further ado, Mr. Zappala is here to talk to us about the new act.
I'm very proud to say that we backed and pushed Act 71. Act 71 came out of this revolving door nonsense that was going on, and it started several years ago, but it became a little bit more prevalent recently. Guys would get arrested, they go down, they get bailed out, and these are serious charges, a lot of which had to do with guns. So when it became that type of case that was revolving back into the community, we acted across Pennsylvania to try to get this legislation passed as quickly as possible. So what it does is it creates another obligation on the courts. Now the courts only can proceed based on information they receive from the police. The people that are here representing my office are going to make sure that every police agency understands they will supply that information. That's easy for us to do. Act 71 gives people, victims typically, the right to know about any proceeding, any hearing at which bail could be a legitimate consideration. That's typically most of what you guys handle, most of what we handle. So it is a big change, and I hadn't seen something like this type of action by the legislature for quite some time, as it affects the procedures in the courts. Last time they did it was they created sentencing guidelines, and it changed everything in terms of judicial discretion for a large part. You guys know how the standards work and all that. But that was kind of that was pioneering in terms of legislation at that time because of the different branches of government. And this reminds me of that. But it became that type of situation. We have to have a voice. Victims have to have a voice. I had the pleasure of joining Miss Geraldine's class the other day. I don't know what you call it.
It's our group, the survivors group.
Wonderful people. Everybody, unfortunately, is in a similar situation, but they want to have a voice. They want to talk. They want to express to other people, to other families, other moms, that together we can deal with this stuff. And I was just very, very impressed, especially when you run the meeting. She's really good at the meeting. That's pretty much what I wanted to tell you about Act 71. My guys understand it will be your responsibility, especially Bill Patula. It will be your responsibility to make sure this works, and that the police understand that it's a priority.
For us specifically, it's folks who are intimate partner violence victims. So this is somebody who you were involved in a relationship with. They have done, physical violence, sexual violence, etc. In many cases, it's that they have, it's aggravated assault. It might be attempted homicide. They might have physically, intimidated or hurt your children. So this is really emotional, right? The entire case from start to finish is incredibly emotional, and it's scary. So many of the folks, the victims who are in court, are just absolutely so scared. And so keeping them informed of what's going on in the hearing that so deeply involves them, that is about them. I mean, it's about the person who perpetrated the violence, but it is, of course, has so deeply impacted their lives. That is absolutely critical in so many different ways, in the ways of just safety, I mean, most importantly, their physical safety, emotional safety, and then their empowerment to be able to start to take back some of what they lost from the person who committed this violence against them.
We really support, in this scenario, especially with Act 77, but in general, the local programs and the local process with which victims are served. Ultimately, that is the utmost importance. And so this bill in itself we support because allowing victims to have a seat at the table, any table, is just as important as any other right that is out there.
Obviously, we had that major cases that came out of the Allegheny Valley. These guys, they took care of everybody. I got, people couldn't stop saying, without you guys, we would have been entirely different. I just wanted to acknowledge it.
What support is available to victims currently when they have to attend a bail hearing, for example?
Well, I would say the Office of Victim Services is very important, but I would also say, you know, it's all of our advocates that are there for them. And so that's why this is so important, because it allows a connection between what's actually happening on the legal side and allows someone to communicate that message and really interact with and translate those resources that are available to the survivors so that they don't feel like they're just kind of floating out there on their own, unsure about next steps and what's going to happen next in the process.
Does the county have a process in place to accommodate the new rights of victims to file motions in a criminal case of which they are a part?
Yes.
Would you elaborate, please? Where's,
Chris Connors. Chris is now the court administrator. Chris used to work in our office. And he's the one that developed ASAP, the system we use now. So I think I'm being responsible for the question.
yeah.
So what ASAP is going to do, it's going to be modified so that you can put that information, anything about a victim, it's confidential.
Early on, my sons were murdered in 1993, and they were murdered 45 days apart. And I'm telling you that if it wasn't for the police investigation and then the good work of the DA's office, that wouldn't have happened. For my oldest son, there was an arrest of 3 people. So that alone, you know, gave me some solace. But what happened in that case was they made bond, and they got out, and they went out to hurt other people. And I didn't know they had bond because we were just starting to develop this system. The system was just starting to be like, hey, there needs to be something for victims to know. And as a homicide survivor, my granddaughter of my oldest son, his daughter, lived in Whitaker, and I went to go visit her. And when I got to Whitaker, the shooter, one of the shooters was there, and I didn't know he was out. I didn't know, you know, I had went to the preliminary hearing. So I find this so essential for any crime that happens, but especially in a homicide, a sexual assault, a domestic violence. Those are 3 very, very serious, and even aggravated assault, because that person's going to come back and want to do more. So there's not too many crimes that I can't see that the victim doesn't need to know where their perpetrator is at all time. And that's what this system does and nurtures for victims. Like, we're able to offer that to them, and then we facilitate it through our 24-hour helpline. Like, they get calls in the middle of the night if they're even being moved from Allegheny County Jail to Westmoreland County Jail. So this system is priceless to victims of violence. This is very, very, very important to victims, and I'm glad to be in a county where we embrace that, and we're letting victims have that voice and that right, and that we recognize and uphold them.
With the DA's office and the victim service agencies, you know, we collaborate a lot, but I think kind of having teeth behind the Victims' Bill of Rights and able to enforce these acts just strengthens that collaboration and that relationship.
Definitely.
That's a really good point. It's a good point, not only for the advocates and for the district attorney's office, it's a great point for the victims, because sometimes they don't know who's on their side and who isn't. This act is really, both of these acts are very important for victims. And I do want to say that in Allegheny County, we are very fortunate. Under our district attorney's leadership, there's a lot of support for victims. You have somebody who commits a homicide, kills one person. I'll take the guy in Uvalde, Texas, the one that happened in Texas, that shot up the school, like 26 kids. Well, those 26 kids have 26 parents, and those 26 parents have, you know, another, it extrapolates to the whole community, the police officers, everybody. Those people are all victims of that one man's crime. And they deserve to have some support, to feel comfortable that's not going to happen again, and that they can be safe in their own community. And that's what victim services and the district attorneys across, and the police officers across Allegheny County are very cognizant of and do a very good job for. So I want to thank you all for the work that you do.
I think we're one of the few counties in Pennsylvania where all victim services are independent. They're not part of the government. People get mad at the government. We talked about that the other day. They're not the government. They're passionate. They're in this because they want to do it, you know. So and they've always been a conscience for the police, but it's worked. It's worked. I think it's worked. And I wanted you guys, my guys, to understand the same thing. These guys are really, they're critical to what I'd like to see done every day. And I think they're critical to the operations.